back to Biggest Little Victory. This is Stephen.
And Pastor Kendra.
And it's been quite a while since we have given you guys a podcast.
It's been 1 week since you looked at me. Sorry.
She's already going to... And that is Tyler, for those of you who might remember Tyler. Those of you who don't, you have sincerely missed out. So we are finally back after all this time, and we're going to cover two sermons. One of them was from, 2 weeks ago now? 2 or 3 weeks ago?
Yours?
Yeah.
3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago. Okay. It's been a while, everybody. There's been a whole move. There's been a lot going on, and a lot to pray for. Yeah, it's been a nightmare for some people, and so there's a lot to pray for and a lot to be thankful for. There's just kind of a mixed bag of events going on, but we can get into that in just a little bit. So we're going to cover two sermons. It's going to be the sheep among wolves, and then we're going to go through Pastor David's sermon from last week, Hebrews, What Faith Does. But before we get into that, Pastor Kendra, what do we have coming up in the VCF world?
Okay, even though there has been a huge gap in our episodes, there's not much to announce. The only new thing that we have is that on Saturday, September 12th, we are holding a drive-through prayer event at the church. That was very successful last year. And of course, this year we're going to be doing things a little differently. You know, we would stick our hands in people's windows and pray for them. We're obviously not doing that this year. We will be wearing masks and practicing safe social distancing guidelines. But it's a way where people can, the teens hold up signs and people can come and get prayed for from members of our church, and it's just a great experience. So that is on Saturday, September 12th from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Other than that, it's just the usual from here. Follow us on Facebook at Victory Christian Fellowship and at VCF Family. Like us on follow us on Instagram at VCF Reno, and like our YouTube channel to watch our sermons and listen to all our podcasts at VCF Reno, and download our app. You can go into the App Store, your Google Play Store. It's just VCF Reno. There are our announcements, a way to give, our podcasts, everything in one special place. And that's that. Yep.
Yeah, that app is becoming the all-in-one for everything. So it's a place where news is going to be, a place where announcements is going to be. We're putting the podcast on there. We got Biggest Little Victory on there just this last week. And we will have the sermons, the podcasts will be actually hosted through there, but they're still going to be the same way, where you can either watch or just listen to the audio. So if you have a smartphone, that is probably the best way to stay in touch and up to date with what's going on in the church, but also you can follow us on Facebook and see any more important updates there. But yeah, we're just continuing to stay safe. And in fact, we're so concerned with that Kendra and I are now practicing the ultimate in safe distancing.
Yeah, that's not for any other reason than Stephen felt the need to abandon me.
Just got tired of it. Just said, I'm out of here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, he performed a safe move a couple states away, but thank God for the 21st century to where we didn't have to boot him off the podcast and replace him.
Are you still looking into that other podcast pal for you?
No, after that, no. I'm trying to figure out, people need to volunteer for the tech team first, and then I'll work with that.
Yeah, so in case you hadn't heard before, please help out with our tech team, because we are in dire need of volunteers for that. It includes helping out on Sundays. We've got cameras to set up. We've got a presentation software to run. We've got a soundboard to run. There's a lot of opportunities for you to get involved. So if you are anywhere in the Reno area, please, we need your help to get up and running on Sundays, because there's opportunities for you, and certainly opportunities to learn.
It would take a massive burden off of Pastor Kendra's shoulders here. So it would be great if I could get a couple hands on deck. But till then, I got it handled. I'll be fine. But it would be nice. But one of those people, if you are interested in continuing on and learning on audio things, then becoming part of a podcast is a good start as well.
That too. All right. So you said you have a feel-good story for us today, a little victory to share.
I do. All right, everybody. So this one is called Cafe Owner Feeds Hungry Migrants. The former war-torn Bosnia has become the latest thoroughfare on the European migration route and has struggled to cope with the arrival of thousands of migrants and refugees en route to Croatia. Not all the locals are happy about their uninvited guests, but Asim Latik, a cafe owner on the border town of Velika Claudia, I probably said that so wrong, sorry everybody, responded straight from the heart. I saw a man standing in the street. I asked if he was hungry, and he said he didn't have any money. I said it didn't matter, and I fed him. The next day, more people came, and before long, Latik's cafe had become a kitchen for migrants. He and 3 friends served thousands of free meals, funding them from their own pockets for 2 months. We are all war veterans. We know what it means to be hungry, says Latik.
That is so cool.
That is so sweet.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit of kindness goes a long way.
Absolutely. We really do need to find some victories happening here in the country, because I swear every day it's just yet another clown show of like, who said what now? You know, it's like,
yeah, I'd like some America feel good stories too, but they're hard to come by right now.
Just got to dig a little deeper, I guess. All right.
Yeah, I like hearing about other parts of the country. Makes me feel less closed in America.
You're right. Like, oh, good. There is still good things happening in the rest of the world. Right. Thank goodness for that. Oh, man.
Yep.
So we will go ahead.
All right. Let's talk about your sermon, sir.
Let's do it.
It was a really great sermon, you guys. If you haven't watched it yet, please go watch it or listen to it, because it was thought-provoking, it was passionate, and it was incredible. And I'm happy that you got to say goodbye with such a bang, Abandoner.
Abandoner. Oh, man. Yeah, so...
I'm totally kidding. I'm so happy for Steve and everybody.
It's just really upset now. So, when I was coming up with that, part of it obviously was inspired by me moving and, going out into the world, but the whole time that I practiced that, I think I practiced that like, I don't even know, 15 times or something like that. It was just over and over and over again. And the first I think like 3 times that I practiced it, I was like, oh, cool, this is everything I want to say. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I need to time myself because I don't know how long I just took. And so like the 4th time that I ran through it, I was like, oh, that was an hour and 10 minutes. I'm not going to have that much time. So I had to keep timing myself. I don't think
a lot of people have that kind of attention span.
Oh, well, I mean, in the first service, I only had like 21 minutes. Like when I looked at the clock, I was like, oh, boy, this is a lot shorter than I've even planned for. So it was really good that I was just kind of shaving it, and had to keep working it down. And, of the people who have heard my sermon the most, it was definitely Frida. My little dog heard my sermon more than anyone else, and I'm sure she was sick of it by the time I was done. But yeah, it was.
Oh gosh, I've missed Frida too. I miss Frida more than I miss you.
I know, it's fair. Everyone does. But yeah, after that, that's why people said like, you never even looked at your notes. I was like, I know. Because like,
well, do you know how many times I said that out loud?
I was working through it so much. So just this passage that I was looking at there was actually a second one that I was going to use. So Matthew in chapter 10, verses 16 through 18, where Jesus sends out the 12. And, he says that you're like sheep among wolves. It partners well with another one in Luke 10, verses 2, where he sends out the 72. And it's kind of a similar premise. He's sending him out into the world. But there's also a specific verse in there that I wanted to touch on, and they just didn't. I was talking about how we need more workers. There are a lot of people out there that still haven't heard the gospel. And I think a large portion of kind of what the call to action for the church was that we hear about the Great Commission saying, oh, there's your job is to go out into all the nations to make disciples of all the nations. And, some people will say, well, we've already done that. There's at least a few disciples in every country on earth. So we're good. We're done. Now Jesus can come back and we all can just go to heaven. And it's like, you're forgetting about all the other people in those nations who still, have not had a chance to hear the truth about the gospel. And you're just essentially okay with leaving them out of heaven. And, that kind of a thing was just like, you shouldn't be okay with that concept. You shouldn't be okay or comfortable with the idea that Jesus just comes back for you and you're okay leaving behind everyone else. So that was just kind of that weight that was on my heart with that, and wanting people to understand that we need to not be so selfish. In a lot of times we think about heaven and it's what we want, it's about us and it's about what we want to get out of it. And we forget that the whole point of heaven is about God, and what God wants more than anything is for everyone to be there. So we shouldn't ever be okay with the idea that we're leaving people behind. It was interesting. So whenever I get excited about preaching, and it's not because it's definitely not because I enjoy getting up there, because boy, my heart every time I get up in front of people is just pounding.
About to jump out of your chest.
Yeah, it's about to jump out of my chest, but it's like teaching invigorates me. And I love teaching people about the Bible, especially because, one, it forces me to have to spend a lot of time studying it and, wanting to make sure that I'm telling the truth and not just spewing out my opinions, that aren't biblically based. So it forces me to spend a lot of time with it. And then, two, I've just always enjoyed teaching. I've always enjoyed that.
No, you're a good teacher. I've learned a lot from you.
That's good. Thanks. Sometimes I don't know. It's like a lot of the stuff that I learned, and I think this is just true of anyone. And it's from somebody else. It's little pieces and nuggets of wisdom that I collect from other people. So really, it's not just I don't ever want anyone to think that it's just me coming up with all these intelligent remarks, because it definitely isn't. There's definitely a lot of people that inspire me and encourage me through just. Sometimes it's a random one-off sentence. It's a phrase. It's not even always on a Sunday, in a sermon. Sometimes it's just somebody talking out in the real world. I'm like, oh, that's a really good way of thinking about that. Or,
Yep.
And just stuff like that just sticks with me. And then I just kind of throw it all together in this jumble of a thing. And here you go. Here's everything that's in my brain currently. It's what other people have said. It's what I've thought. It's what I've read. It's what I've prayed about. And, I just kind of like it. It's cool.
That's a good quality to have, because not a lot of people will listen to people and be like, huh, yeah, I'm going to stick that in my arsenal too. They're like, yeah. No, I disagree with you.
Well, that's the new thing. It's the new thing to just disagree with things that everyone else loves. That's what makes you cool now is, well, I know all of you liked that movie, but I thought it was terrible. Because now everyone's asking you, oh, why? But why did you think that was so terrible? It's like
right.
The attention getting stance now.
Right. Yes. Yes. It's a sad, sad world. Sad.
Yeah.
But yes, it's a good quality to have, Stephen, that there are things, because I've found myself starting to do that too, because I definitely was selfish in the past. And so I find myself latching onto things and really brewing upon them and being like, you know what? That's absolutely right. And I need to remember that. So yeah. I back, just even a couple years ago, I wouldn't even hear a voice of reason. If it would smack me in the face, I wouldn't hear it. So it's a good quality to have, and I'm happy to be learning it. So I'm glad that you've perfected it. At least one of us has.
I wouldn't say I've perfected it, because my goodness, some people, I've been accused of having selective hearing. It's like, it's not that I select what I hear. It's just what my brain ends up holding on to. And what it usually ends up holding on to is stuff that doesn't matter.
Right.
Even today, I remembered a joke that my dad had said to me when I was 10, and it's the most ridiculous dad joke ever. And I was just walking through a mall, and I see a sign for Sears, and I just remembered it's something that my dad said was going to Sears to get new ears. And it was something he said when I was 10, and I was like, why do I remember that? But I can't remember directions home or something, something way more important that I need to be thinking about right now. But that's what I remember. I'm so glad.
Oh gosh.
I'm so glad that's stuck in my head.
I feel that on a spiritual level. I can remember what my sophomore year geometry teacher said about Pythagorean theorem, but I can't remember what I read in my textbook yesterday.
Right. Yeah, it's weird how the brain works that way.
Yeah.
So when you did your sermon, how often did you run through yours? Do you remember?
Oh gosh. Well, I recorded it twice. Read it out loud to Stephen.
I don't remember that.
Read it out loud to Dustin, my husband.
Right. We both have a name that ends in N, so.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. I ran it through with him once because his attention span is, on par with a goldfish when it comes to stuff like this, which is fine. And then I read it to myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say probably not that much, like 12 times total. Not much at all.
Nice. That's not bad.
But I mean, you could see. I mean, I revert to my notes a lot in my sermon, but
yeah,
whatever.
Well, I mean, but the difference is I partially knew what I wanted to talk about, back in July when I asked,
right?
Whereas you only had 2 weeks, and he was limiting you and telling you cannot prepare for 2 weeks, or until the 2 weeks until you talk. So you were
right. Like I knew I was giving a sermon at the beginning of this year.
But I knew what it was
on. I knew my.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah, I did.
Oh, you
I knew what it was on. I knew my verses. I knew all that. But my dad was like, "Nope, don't start yet. Don't start yet. Don't start yet." So after this one, I told him, I was like, "Thanks for all your advice, but I'm not taking it next time. Like I'm taking some of it, but I'm gonna like next time I know that I'm preaching a sermon, I'm gonna start immediately, at least outlining and drafting it, and then perfecting it as." Leading up to it, but no more of this 2 weeks business. That was awful advice, Dad.
Well, and it wasn't even just like that's all you were doing for 2 weeks. You were working, you were doing school, so it was like it was more less than 2 weeks because it was a crunch in between the rest of your life. So.
Yeah, a crunch is right. Yeah. Well, how many times did you go through yours?
Like I said, I started building it as soon as he told me that. He was like, yeah, I'll find a date for you and it'll either be, this Sunday or this Sunday. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And pretty much as soon as that happened, I think I already started thinking about it. But for me, I found that the best way that I am the most creative is if I really cram for like a day on thinking about it and trying to come up with a plan. And then I just stop. Because after that, my brain will come up with the rest of it on its own. Like my subconscious will work it all out because I've spent so much time forcing my brain to think on it. And then just by letting it go is how I usually come up with my best ideas that I end up loving the most is by just letting it go. And then it just kind of, it flows after that. So I don't know why that works, but it just does. And sometimes it's not always efficient and it's not always possible, especially if I'm under a deadline. And I don't have time to let my brain, vegetate and think about it for a bit. Not vegetate, but more like marinate,
Vegetate.
Not turn to mush, But I don't know. Sometimes it's not always possible, though. So sometimes it's like, well, I just have to go with, what I can plan right now and make that work. But when I can get the chance to take a step back and, okay, well, let me think about this. And then I usually can do some of my best work that way. So I think it just kind of fits in with my personality, though. I'm just kind of that mellow, reflective kind of guy, that needs to take that step back. So
yeah, 100%. All right. Well, you want to read the Bible verses?
I will do so. Yeah. As a side note, I think one of my most fun things was quoting Carl Sagan because I don't think no one expected that. That Sunday, I was quoting an atheist. I was quoting an astrophysicist who was very, very atheist, and yet it was just more about his words. And I had some people afterwards, they're like, that was an interesting choice for a person to quote. And it was like, if you listen to the rest of the sermon, you got the point that I can learn from people that I don't necessarily always agree with. And I don't always agree with Carl Sagan, but he also had some really amazing words.
Right.
So in Matthew chapter 10, going through verses 16 through 18, we have Jesus talking to his apostles, and he warns them saying, listen, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. So be as clever as snakes and as innocent as doves. Be careful of people, because they will arrest you and take you to court and whip you in their synagogues. Because of me, you will be taken to stand before governors and kings, and you will tell them and the non-Jewish people about me. So it's kind of like this dire warning of, look out, there's a lot of people out there that are not going to like what you're doing. And in a different passage, he tells them saying that, don't be surprised when the world hated you because it hated me first. Like this shouldn't come as a shock to you that people aren't going to like you because even just while Jesus was still alive, look at how people treated him. There was people looking for an excuse to get rid of him almost immediately as soon as he started his ministry. So how is it any surprise that people who are following after the teachings of Jesus, and living out what he says, of course they're not going to like you either, So he's given them this this serious warning. And I think it's just as true today as it was then, that we are like sheep among wolves. There are a lot of people out there that want to destroy your faith. They want to take it away by using scientific explanation to try and explain it away. They want to take it away by, even when we say, somebody who recovered from, an ailment is a miracle, and they want to explain it medically. Well, no, it was because of this medicine, or no, it was because of this surgery, and those are, I'd say, more of the innocent or low key ways that people try to take away your faith. But then there are those who, I think some of the most dangerous people who are a challenge to your faith sometimes come from within the church itself.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it's like when you're really excited and you have this great faith for God, and they're almost telling you, you need to just calm down for a moment. I know that you really love God and you're talking about the Holy Spirit a lot, but let's just calm down for a second, and it's the people who have stories of the Holy Spirit, speaking to them, God speaking to them, or something revealed to them, or even just being able to do things that don't make sense in our natural world. I think people today now are more tied to the natural world than they are to understanding that there is still a spiritual world, despite that's what the fact, the Bible says there's a spiritual world. But I think a lot of Christians today would rather just see things through the practical world, because that's what we live in, and so that's how they are taught to think and reason and understand.
Right. And they're, that's, like you said, that's just the world that they live in. So they're adapting to the world because most of the world is going to question whatever it is you do. And so it's like, if you go out, like on Saturday, I played in a charity cornhole tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy who was there, and he was playing this song, and it was not a Christian song, but it spoke about needing Jesus. And so I asked him what it was called so I could listen to it like in depth and really find out what it was about. And we got into a theological discussion. He grew up as a Catholic, and he, like hardcore Catholic. He's a half Mexican. So he had, half of his family was really, really into the whole Catholic thing. And he said that what turned him off was that a half of the service ended up being asked, like he went to a service where half of it was them asking for money.
Oh man.
And I get that. I totally get that. I'd be turned off by a church if they did that too.
Yeah. Right.
And so he, that was when he started, going away. And he told me, he's like, I never stopped believing. It's not that I don't believe in God. It's just, churches have this, this organized thing where if you're not in this niche, then you don't belong here. And I looked at him and I was like, that might be the case for some of the churches that you've been to. And I'm not even just the denomination, but just the churches, like the lowercase c churches. You gotta expand your horizons. You gotta try the other ones. And so I started telling him about ours. And he asked me what denomination it was. I told him Nazarene. And I was like, and I always start this off, and it's terrible, and I'm probably going to get yelled at for saying this, but I always start off the conversation with a terrible fact about Nazarenes, and because you have to recognize that not your faults, the faults as as a whole. So I always tell people that Jim Jones started out as a Nazarene, and it's true. Jim Jones started out as a Nazarene, and
right.
he poisoned his congregation of like 958 people. And so it's like, okay, so there's this terrible fact about my denomination. So there you go. But let me tell you how we've grown since then and continue to grow. And so that's kind of how I started off, because people like to focus on the bad stuff. So I use this one bad fact, which of course there are more, I understand that, but this is a pretty bad fact. And I use it to show how we've grown. And it was a really enlightening experience. And he was like, I'm not going to promise that I'll ever come to your church, but you've got me thinking that not everybody is like my church. And I'm like, yeah, it's important to remember that, because I'm not here spewing scripture at you. I'm not here telling you, like, come to my church, we'll change your life. I'm not here telling you that. I'm just trying to tell you, like, as a woman of Jesus, it is my job to share with you my experience, to share with you about my church, and to, entice you to join me, but not like, join us. Join us.
One of us.
Yes, one of us. Yeah, like, not like crazy. But it's, but it shows we have this warning from Jesus, like, be careful because you're going to not be liked. And it shows a true, like, not one of the aspects of a true faithful person is saying, you know what? I don't care. I'm still going to do it. I'm still going to go out and do my duty as a faithful person and as a child of God, and show what I know and share my story and hopefully bring people back with me.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I think it was a good experience. It was a good conversation.
I think there's something so powerful in being willing to admit your mistakes rather than just pretend you're perfect, because then people are able to see you as more than just this guy who never fails, because it's like, oh, this guy's holier than thou. He's too good for me. And that was actually even there was a pastor here at the church I've been going to. He talked about a story where he was working on a boat, and the guys that he worked with didn't really like pay much attention to him because of his, like, they knew he was a Christian and they knew what he believed, and they just kind of saw him as something too, like, he was just too perfect. And then the one day he makes a big mistake, and to them it was just kind of like, oh, like they could kind of see the more human side of him now he wasn't just this ultra perfect person. Now he's someone that they could talk to. He was someone that they could understand. And what he said was, like, what he did, like, when he he fell off the boat essentially because he got stuck in a way that it pulled him off the boat, and he cussed, and he was like, right or wrong, like, I wish I hadn't, but at the same time it was a way to open up the conversation. And so it's like, even if we're not always at our best, even if we're not always where we want to be, sometimes just being fallible is the way to people's hearts, because they can see, like, okay, now I get you. It's kind of like when you find somebody in a church that has a similar background story to yours, like how you grew up, or things that you've been through in your life, and you're like, oh yeah, that's that's pretty cool. Like, and you can suddenly have this bond with this person that you don't with anyone else, because they just don't know what you're talking about.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a good icebreaker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really liked, kind of going back to what you were saying in your sermon. You said, stop for looking. Wow. Stop for looking. Okay, Kendra Faith, let's get this together. All right. You said, stop looking for messages in the Bible that A, aren't there, and B, don't matter.
Yeah.
And that kind of struck, because there are people, like I said it in my sermon, I don't like to spew scripture at people.
Right.
Because that's not what they want to hear. They don't want to hear, well, like, oh, well, First Thessalonians says this and this and this about this and this and this. Okay, well, that's great. Well, that's not what I'm trying to say here. So that one really struck with me, because while the Bible is a great resource for knowing how you should and how you should act and all that stuff, it's not necessarily you're not going to find every answer in the Bible, and you're gonna be searching so hard for that answer that you're gonna misinterpret a message that wasn't meant to define what you were looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your intention with what you're searching for is to go out and point the finger at somebody, then you're doing it with the wrong intentions. You need to take a step back and have that self-check and be like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And why am I saying, what I'm saying? So, yeah, so when I talked about that, it was just kind of a thought very specifically towards people who try to use verses that are trying to find out when Jesus is coming back. They're trying to add and multiply things together and come up with hidden coded words about, like, oh, I know exactly when he's coming back, and he's coming in this year. And there was people that said 88 Reasons Why Jesus is Coming Back in 1988. There was actually a pamphlet that was going out because like, based around that idea. And of course, now we're in 2020 and he never came. So it's
Either
just
that
like,
or he came and was like, you know what? We're just going to vacay for a couple, 40 years.
right. Yeah. So I told people, I was like, yeah, he can. He can come back in the next 5 minutes. Absolutely. He could also not come back for another 1,000 years. We do not know. And it's not, the point is not to sit around trying to figure that out, but the point is how you are preparing your heart for that moment when he does, because you have no idea. And rather than spending all your time, trying to find messages that don't exist to, just to say that you're the one who has the answer for whatever publicity stunt you're pulling, what if instead you spent the time actually building his kingdom here and making disciples of nations as you were instructed to do? So, but it's definitely for a lot of other messages as well. People who want to condemn others just to feel more righteous about themselves. They want to take away your actions. I was talking about this actually with some friends here just the other day. We're talking about, the politics and what's going on this November, and how there are people who just genuinely believe that you can either be a Christian or you can be a Democrat. It's like there's just people. Gosh. Yeah, there's just people that have these kind of like heavy viewpoints that to them, like that's how they see using the Bible as a way of defending their own ideologies. And if you're doing it for that purpose, again, you're doing what's called eisegesis, which is you start with a conclusion and look for ideas to support it, when you're supposed to be using exegesis, which is you start with all the facts and then you form your conclusions around those. Mm-hmm. And too often we get into the problem of starting with ideas, starting with conclusions, and then cherry picking what we want.
Yeah, I'm not going to touch that.
You're just going to leave that one there. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. So, and then the other verse that I read was in Matthew, and that was chapter 26 and verses 23 and 24. And this very specifically about Judas. That's why I, in a way, like I cherry picked that verse, because it was a great way to highlight, there's other verses certainly that do it as well, but it's a great way to highlight the emotion that Jesus, that God feels, that the Holy Spirit feels, and just, with Judas in that instance. And so it says in verse 23, Jesus answered, "The man who has dipped his hand with me into the bowl is the one who will turn against me. The Son of Man will die, just as the scriptures say. But how terrible it will be for the person who hands the Son of Man over to be killed. It would be better for him if he had never been born." So when you hear that, it's like, wow, those are some heavy words coming from Jesus. And that's why I said,
he clapped back hecka hard.
Like, if you've ever committed actions to the point that Jesus is saying this about you, like, boy, you have really messed up. Like big time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why it's like there's two ways that could have been said. There's two ways I imagine his inflection. Maybe there's a third, but it's either like he's brokenhearted for the fact that it's like, man, it honestly would have been better if he had never been born, because ouch, boy.
Yeah, right.
What has he done to himself? And
right. Even before you sold me out, I knew that this was going to happen to me. Yeah. So you sold me out for nothing, just so you know.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You gained nothing, because depending on the story, he either just threw out the silver coins that he got from the Pharisees and didn't even do anything with them, or he used them and bought a field and then hung himself. So it's like either way, like he didn't really enjoy what he got at all. It was just a waste. There was no point in it.
Nope. So don't be a Judas.
Yeah. Don't be a Judas. Yeah. No, it was, it's hard to think of what we do that just disappoints God, at this point. He's just so disappointed sometimes especially when we're taking the Bible for our own sake and making it about us, making it about our beliefs, and you just wonder about
and using it to spew hate.
Yeah. And division, and especially division in the church.
Yeah, no, it's bad. It's bad.
But yeah, that was kind of the sermon in a nutshell. It's just a lot of a lot of different things that I'd been thinking about and just kind of throwing it all together because that's just how it goes. It's like what I said
Yes.
that Sunday that my brain does not think in a linear fashion. It pieces a whole bunch of stuff together. It's like that's why Randon said like you gave me a picture of an orange thing going into the sky. I don't understand.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I know. I almost use pictures in mine too, but I was like, meh, too much for the first one.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but it was incredible. Like we said at the beginning, if you have not listened to or watched it, please go do so because you are in for a treat. Stephen spews some truth and really strikes you right where you need it sometimes.
I had people come up to me afterwards, and like, well, even while I was talking, there were some people that were sitting in their seats, like almost like sideways, just kind of like leaning back, like as I was talking to them, like, oh boy,
Oh, oh my!
But it was good, and I was happy for that. I was happy to see that people were catching what I was hearing, and it definitely seemed like that was the case. Like afterwards, you usually have the people that just come up and like, great stuff, and they just kind of head out. But I think I had everyone that came up to me was like, here's what I really loved, and so that was kind of cool to hear. But
yeah, no, it was awesome.
Yeah. So now we'll move on to Pastor David's from last week. And it was on Hebrews, going back into Hebrews, finishing, I don't know if was he finishing up the series or did he go on it again this last week?
No, I think he finishes in the next week or the week after because we still have chapter 13.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
Obviously, that just gave away that I have not listened to the sermon yet from yesterday. So, sorry, everybody.
So it wasn't Pastor David. But Pastor David took the day off, and
Pastor
Lewis gave a random sermon for the kids. Okay. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Nice.
Yeah.
Well.
So, no, you're fine.
Sounds good. All right. Well, this one was all of Hebrews 3 except for the first 2 verses. So yours pretty much focused on the first 3 verses, and then he just went from the 3rd verse and then covered the rest of the chapter.
Right.
Yeah. And so I'm not going to read all of Hebrews 11 because it's a long passage there, but I can.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot, but I can read on what he focused on, and that was just 3 through I think it was around 6.
Yeah, around or about there. Yeah,
somewhere out there because that's when he began summarizing. So we're just going to go through Hebrews chapter 11, 3 through 6, and follow along if you'd like, or just sit back and listen, and then we'll go from here. It is by faith we understand that the whole world was made by God's command, so what we see was made by something that cannot be seen. It was by faith that Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. God said he was pleased with the gifts Abel offered and called Abel a good man because of his faith. Abel died, but through his faith, he is still speaking. It was by faith that Enoch was taken to heaven so he would not die. He could not be found because God had taken him away. Before he was taken, the scripture says that he was a man who truly pleased God. Without faith, no one can please God. Anyone who comes to God must believe that he is real and that he rewards those who truly want to find him. And from there is when he began summarizing about Noah and Abraham and everything else, all the promises that people of the Old Testament just took God on that faith, that when he said something was going to happen, that he would do it. Of course, they weren't always perfect in those beliefs. Sometimes they doubted God and did things they shouldn't have, like Abram, who should have trusted that he and Sarah were going to have a son, and then instead he goes off with Hagar. So, so it's like he eventually did trust, but there was also some moments of non-trust.
Mistrust, yes.
Mistrust, that's the word.
Non-trust. That's a crazy story. That's a crazy story. When I watched it, that the National Geographic, the Bible biopic that they released.
Oh, yeah.
I watched it on that. I was like, oh my. Because I basically only skimmed the Bible at that point, so I didn't really understand. But the way that they put it out on that, I was just like, oh, Oh my.
You wonder about that story though, because it's like what did you think was going to happen when you had a kid with your wife's servant? Like, how was that not going to add more
Right.
drama to your life?
Right. Yeah, that's one thing that has not changed, and that is a
Right.
woman scorned.
Yeah, exactly. Even though I think it was actually like when you go through it, like she even said, like, yeah, do this. I'm too old
Yeah.
to give you a kid. Like, go be with my servant. But it's like, you should have just known that was going to be more trouble. Like, when has that ever worked out? But
yeah, never.
never.
Never since, and never for the rest of our lives.
Right, exactly. So
Anyway.
one of the so one of my favorite points that he had from that message was the greater our faith, the greater our unity with each other. Like the greater that we are together in what we believe, are together in our trust of God, that when we're acting in faith together, it's like it just creates that unity just automatically because we're all fighting for the same thing, instead of
Right.
One person having this faith that God's going to come through and someone else is like, yeah, he might not, who knows? It's kind of hard
Right.
for both of those people have the same passion about what they're doing, but both are just like, yeah, he will come through. We both know it. There's automatically that bond that the two of you already have.
You guys could have nothing else in common. Absolutely nothing. You guys could have different star signs. One of you could like olives and the other doesn't. One of you likes pickles and the other doesn't. But one of you could be a Democrat, one of you could be a Republican. But the common denominator is your faith in God. And that is the infinite common denominator.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's my favorite thing about faith, is that I don't have a lot in common with a lot of people from the church. And but we have this one common denominator, and that brings us so close together that we would do anything for each other regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the fact that you can trust people, that there's a degree of trust that comes from building off of that faith that you can have with people that even if you don't have other things in common with them, which is very powerful for the church. It's a very, very powerful tool to have that kind of trust.
Right. Absolutely. It's incredible. Yeah. It's hard to bring down that wall though. Mm-hmm. Just thinking that, oh, well, I don't have anything in common with this person. But, like even Stephen and I do not have a lot in common. Y'all.
True.
Like we really don't. But, and we're different personalities. I'm, the comic relief, and he's the articulate genius. But our common denominator is Jesus and wanting to spread the word of Jesus, and that's why we work so well.
And general goofballiness.
Yes, that too. We do laugh a lot, even when we're not speaking of Jesus things. But we have a good time. But the point is that it doesn't matter, just because somebody's different from you. That common denominator is so important. And even if you're the bottom of your fraction is stronger than the bottom of their fraction. Mm-hmm. Just being there and showing like, hey, this is what being a person of God looks like. This is what it's like to be a person of God and truly follow him and do his work. This is what it looks like. And, we want you to be a part of it type thing. So it works both ways.
Yeah, definitely. And, as you work together too and reach more people, you see that harmony just grow, and even across the differences, which is great because you work together to reach people, but then independently you're reaching people uniquely. And then those people can see who else you hang out with and like, wow, but how do you hang out with them? You're completely different people. And then they can still see what kind of a picture of the church looks like, where you have people of all different backgrounds and interests all just working together, and they can all just click. And that's the ideal viewpoint that people should have of the church, is that all these people coming together to work and can work together.
Right. I like to call VCF a lovely bunch of weirdos.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Because we are. We have, it's like a jelly bean factory in there.
Right.
There's so many different types of people in there. It's awesome.
That's true. So you can get plugged in with just about any kind of character by being there. That's for sure.
Yep. 100%. 100%. And I think that's why we're so tight.
Yeah.
Because we focus on the fact that we're all here for the same reason. It doesn't matter that you're into this and I'm not. It doesn't matter that, your favorite color is blue, mine's red. Doesn't matter. It's, we're all here for the same thing, and that makes us more bonded than most things.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, I lost my notes on this sermon, y'all. So, Steve, I'm going off of Stephen's points. It's been a week.
It's been a little bit of, yeah. Goodness. Yeah. Just lots of prayer for the people of VCF. There's just a lot going on.
Yes, please. We'll get into that at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So actually, I think, I said that other one was the main point, but this was, I still stand by that. That was kind of the main point, was how I saw it was, what faith does. It brings us together. It pleases God. It leads to greater trust in God, and it leads to hope, and hope does not disappoint, and so there's just a lot what faith does. And
hope is the permanent Band-Aid on every bad thing that happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I say Band-Aid because I can't really think of another metaphor, but when you get cut, you put a Band-Aid on it. You put Neosporin on it, you put Band-Aid on it, and you hope that it heals.
Right.
So that's kind of what I like to think of as hope, is a Band-Aid, a giant Band-Aid that you can just cloak over whatever is going on, knowing that it'll get better, knowing that and I don't hate saying this, but I know that it induces a lot of eye rolls, but it's important to remember, especially if you are a faithful person, that whatever is happening, it's happening for a reason. And I know that is so cliche, and it's not at all what some people want to hear when they're going through the worst time of their lives. But if you just focus on that, if you just sit there and you're like, you know what? I talked about it in my sermon. I'm just going to give it to God. There's nothing else that you can do. There's nothing else you can do. If it's a medical issue, yes, you're also putting it in the hands of the doctors. Yes, like Stephen said earlier. But what created those medicines? What gave the doctors the ability to be so talented in what they do? God. It's like a chain. It's like the food chain. God is at the top. God is at the top, and he is the reason why all of this is happening. So you have to just take that Band-Aid and you have to put it on it, and you keep it on it until you feel that it's okay to take it off. And I don't know. It's a thing that I've been struggling with personally this last week. So that's how I've looked at it. Like, my life is covered in Band-Aids of hope right now.
Yeah, and just prayer for improvement for sure. It's admirable watching those who go through, Band-Aids of hope, just hanging on, and just because
it's really easy to give up.
It really is. It's easy
to put God on the back burner and try to take things into your own hands. And
and to have the reaction of Peter. He started out with faith, and then he got afraid. He took his eyes off Jesus, and then that's when he began to sink. He was walking on water just like Jesus until he lost hope.
Right. That's a literal and a metaphorical story, y'all.
Yes.
Just so you know.
So it just increases the importance of not just doing things, not going through anything alone, but having somebody that gives you that encouragement to keep focusing on Jesus instead of...
it's hard right now because you're not supposed to be with other people.
Right. Yeah, I know.
So it's hard. It's hard. So it's you got to call upon Jesus to feel not so alone right now. And it's helped. It's helped a lot of people. You talk to faithful people, and even people who are just sticking their big toe into the pond of faith. Sometimes they're like, you know what? The other night I felt so alone, and all I had to do was chit chat with Jesus. And even though he didn't chit chat back, I felt a lot better afterwards.
Absolutely. Yeah. So my favorite quote from what David said was, "Faith looks like three men staring down death, proclaiming that their God can save them. And even if he doesn't, death can't hurt them." It was that absolute faith that, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had, that, our God could save us if he chooses to. He really could.
Hmm.
And even if he doesn't, that does not take away the truth of who he is. Like,
Right.
you can't do anything to us. You can throw us in this furnace, and even if we die, you can't hurt us. And it's just
Yeah.
like, what an amazing story of, thinking about it. Because when you read some of the details of that, when the guards, like, the guards themselves were consumed, and they weren't even in the furnace. So it's like, this was almost like the literal incarnation of hell right in front of you, and you're being threatened with being tossed in there. You can
Right.
only imagine what that's going to feel like, but to them, it was just like, you can't hurt us. It doesn't matter what you do. You could throw us to the lions. You could throw us in this furnace. You could come up with the most painful torture possible, and it doesn't matter, because we have our God, and you're not going to
Right.
take that. And
Right.
that,
Which kind of brings back your sermon.
yeah,
Just they know that this is a possibility,
right,
and they're willing to sacrifice all just for our God.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
To live out life here in the midst of more wolves than there have ever been. Because there's just so many people now, and there's so many people who reject the idea of a God in general, if not just the Christian God. They just don't even like the idea of a God. And so you have so many wolves out there. And that was my whole point, was that, yeah, we might be like sheep, but we have the lion next to us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to remember that he's there, and it's important to remember to stay close, because as long as we have that lion, the wolves won't come anywhere near. And but that just means that it's not faith because of you or because of your efforts. It's faith because of the Spirit through you. It's
Right.
your capability to go out there and withstand all the attacks is going to happen because you have the strength of God behind you.
Right. Yep. And that's the ultimate victory. You still have the rest of your life, but as long as he's right next to you, you'll be just fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that is all I had on my notes. And since you're coasting off my notes, that's also all you had on your notes.
Yep. I'm mooching this week, y'all. I am hardcore mooching this week.
It's all good.
I at least have my notes for Stevens. I just don't know where I put the ones for Pastor David's.
You'll find them for next week,
Yeah, right.
That's
Yeah,
when they'll
and
show up.
I still have to watch Pastor Lewis's sermon from yesterday as well.
Yep.
So we'll maybe you'll get 2 episodes this week, or maybe we'll just do a 2 for next week too. So
just every week we're just doing 2.
yeah, until we catch up.
Yeah, no, that'll be good.
Yeah.
We'll come around.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody who listens to this, I do want to put in a few prayer requests, if you do not mind. Please continue to pray for Stephen for his transition and his move, which, it's fine. He's still an abandoner. And please pray for my husband and myself. We had to say goodbye to our beloved pup. And if you know us personally, you guys know how important that pup was. And most people understand how important pups are. So he was my husband's right-hand man for 11 years and was diagnosed with bone cancer at the beginning of July. So we had a little bit of warning, but it was still a not okay week because of it. And
right.
If you have been a part of our church or have been following the whole Darren's brain tumor, he went in for an emergency CAT scan this last week, and they found what they believe to be additional growths in his brain. The doctor at his neurosurgeon, who he's been with the whole time, has looked at it and has kind of eased the tension, but there's still the worry of the fact that there's extra growth. So please keep Darren and Bridget in your prayers because they need it more than ever right now. So that's it on my end. Do you have any on your end?
I don't. Just it's just be in prayer for people as we're moving into the fall, and Just honestly being in prayer for the nation as a whole.
The world.
Because, yeah, I mean, like I said, half this country is going to be angry regardless of who wins. And that anger is probably not going to be expressed in the way that it should be.
Right.
And we just need a lot of prayer for that, because especially as people of Christians who are supposed to be showing what it's like to have that response in an appropriate manner, to be that example to the rest of the world of how to respond when your candidate loses, the correct way to respond. Or even if you don't vote, whatever that looks like for you, it's just like there's a right and a wrong way to do things, and this nation's
Right.
headed
And
for
stop
a lot of
losing
anger.
friends and family because you don't agree with their political views.
Right.
Like, just
Yeah.
stop doing that.
So
Just let people be people. Let people have their own opinions. Let them vote how they're going to vote, and continue to be friends. It's okay to have
Exactly.
differing opinions and still love your neighbor as you're supposed to.
I love the emphasis with which you added that last line. As you're supposed to. Better watch out, everyone. Pastor Kendra is coming for you if you don't treat people right.
Yeah, I got my first sermon under my belt. I am empowered.
All right. Well, that is it. I don't have any other new announcements. Sometimes we have those sneaky surprise announcements at the end, but I don't this time.
Yep.
So.
No, but remember to go hit up our drive-through prayer, VCF 9744 South Virginia Street. I don't know if it's in the back or the front, but you can't miss it, I'm sure. So
you'll see people
There'll
with
be
masks
pop-ups
on.
and tents. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. But it's an incredible experience. Unfortunately, I'm going to miss it because I get to play softball for the first time in
Ayo.
9 months. So.
That's good. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, but it'll be. I need to put somebody in charge of pictures. That just reminded me of that. But anyway, okay, that's work.
Yeah. Right. All right. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
Alrighty, prayers and love, everybody.